All right, let's start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel on interoperability and cross-chain functionality. I'm Nick from Cointelegraph. I'm going to be your moderator for today. Let's kick that off with the round of introductions. And how do you guys contribute to development of the interop and cross-chain functionality in Web3?
Hi, I'm Hilmar, one of the co-founders of Gelato. We are one of the largest rollup as a service platforms, having projects such as Kraken's Chain and so forth on our platform. And yeah, so we deploy a lot of rollups, and thus always, of course, thinking about interoperability and stuff.
So we are Pi Squared, a very new company. Most of you likely don't know about us. Um, right, so we are a new company, Pi Squared, coming from proof of proof. And what we do, we reduce computations to mathematical proofs using programming language formal semantics. So we get correct by construction program executions, and then we generate zero knowledge proofs. This is the second proof, proof of proof, zero knowledge proof of mathematical proofs. So this way we have a universal approach to verifiable computing. So basically we can generate zero knowledge proofs for executions of any programs in any programming languages. And you plug and play your language. So this is, we believe, the ultimate answer to interoperability. You can use all programming languages and they can interact with each other, because in the end, everything will be reduced to mathematical proofs uniformly. And then from those proofs, mathematical proofs, we generate the zero knowledge proofs that can be used as evidence of correctness for the multi-language, potentially, execution. That's that.
Hi, I'm. Hello, hello. Hello, hello.
Just
Hello,
screen.
hello. All right, hi. I'm Ren from Eclipse. Eclipse is Ethereum's first SVM L2. So basically, what that means is we use the Solana virtual machine for execution and sell out to Ethereum. We originally started as a SVM rollup as a service company, but pivoted to a general purpose L2 around 1 to 1.5 years ago. I wouldn't say we exactly contribute to the interoperability and sort of like cross-chain messaging slash communication space, but I have spent a lot of time looking into it before. I definitely have thoughts there. If anything, what we're trying to do at Eclipse as sort of like a singularly scalable L2 is pretty against the whole like interoperability thesis.
Hi, I'm Chris. I lead BD at Bob. We are a Bitcoin L2. We've been working in kind of the decentralized bridging infrastructure side of stuff the past 5 years. And from that, we made Bob, which is a Bitcoin L2 that's starting off on OP stack and will eventually settle on Bitcoin. Think of it like base, but settles on Bitcoin. I guess we take part in the interoperability side of stuff, which is the research that we do on BitVM, which allows for an optimistic rollup to eventually happen on Bitcoin. We work with Robin Linus, who leads all of that research. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for the intros. Let's start with more of a general question, and then we'll move to more precise questions. So the first one is, interoperability is really crucial for the mass adoption. So could you please elaborate on why is it so important, and how does it impact Web3 overall?
Sure. I think when I talk about interoperability, I think many people refer to like assets being able to be bridged to other chains. I think if you look at the volume of cross-chain messages that relate to bridging and assets, then they are the vast majority of all cross-chain messages. I think that's why you really want to have assets available and be bridged over from one chain to another. And I think what we're seeing right now is we are seeing the rollup-centric roadmap take place. So we are seeing all major applications, all major ecosystems going away from just building on a single chain to actually building their own rollup. I think this makes sense because you want to be able to scale to like millions of users eventually, and doing this all on one chain for me doesn't really make sense. You will always, at the end of the day, with the noisy neighbor problem, hit scalability limits. And so, yeah, we need to figure out, of course, if you have some assets on base, how to get them on Eclipse or how to get them on another chain. And this is, I think, what interoperability wants to figure out, and all hopefully with like a similar sort of security set. That doesn't mean that that leads to a point where you don't have like different assets from different chains with different security backing them on your network. And then, yeah, the weakest link is always that will create issues at the end of the day. So, yeah.
We do it in order. Well, I think it's not negotiable, interoperability. Same like on a computer, right? You don't care that much in what languages the application is implemented, or when you communicate across a network and you call services in AWS or somewhere else. You don't really, the programming language is not the critical component. It's more like what you want to do. Same in Web3. The fact that we are even having this conversation on interoperability, it means that something is not right. So it should be interoperable by construction. All programming languages should be supported. When you buy a computer, right? You don't buy a Python computer. You buy a computer and you expect it to work with all programming languages. So same here. So actually, that's what we are trying to do at PySquare, to bring all programming languages, and the language is important, but it's not important, if you know what I mean. So the language should be there, and it should be whatever language you want. And yes, I agree also that interoperability across different blockchains. Yes, so it's not only for bridging assets, but any programs across any chains and any programming languages, same like in the non-Web3 world. I think that's simply not negotiable. And the fact that we are discussing it, it means that we are on the wrong path. We need to fix this quickly.
Yeah, I think it's quite simple, right? Users want to hold different assets. Users want to swap between different assets. Users want to hold and utilize these assets on different applications on different networks. That's kind of what crypto is and will continue to be over the next 3, 5, 10 years. And that is why we need interoperability, right? To facilitate these asset transfers so that users can use these different assets. Users can hold different assets on all of these different chains, which are hosts to different applications.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Gregory about it is an unavoidable fact of anything when you want to find actual useful things. Like specialization is the thing that makes effective use cases in everything. Like why do cities exist? Like why are we in a big skyscraper right now rather than spread out? It's because it allows more people to do things in a cooperative manner, specialize in what they're good at, and then find useful things through that. Like, the only way to do that is to have a more interoperable place in which things can be done and have a larger user base. And I mean, that's the way that we find the holy grail of product market fit with all of these L2s and use case and everything that's coming on. It has to all be in one place.
Cool, thank you. Should we close that door? Because
yes,
quite
please.
loud and distracting. Yeah, I feel you guys. Cool, thank you. Hilmar, I have a question to you. So, Gelato allows to deploy enterprise-grade rollups in minutes. So the first question, how did you manage to achieve that lightning speed? And the overall, role of rollups in enhancing cross-chain functionality?
Sure, yeah. Rollups are at the end of the day just comprised out of smart contracts that are deployed on certain settlement networks, at least the current ones, and then some infrastructure that you have to spin up and run at scale elastically and hopefully reliably without a lot of downtime. And yeah, so this, if you take this to the extreme, you can literally spin rollups up within minutes, which we sort of done on our UI, so you can go and one-click your own rollup on Ethereum or Base or whatever you like. And yeah, our hypothesis is that every application, every ecosystem that reaches a certain threshold will eventually want to have their own execution environment in order to not be bottlenecked in terms of throughput by other applications that they don't really need to atomically or synchronously compose with. We believe that similar to like the Web 2, right? How the scale, you spin up a lot of servers, you can scale the compute very horizontally across the entire world with like new servers, new rollups that you spin up, and then they can all communicate with each other, right? And in like Web 2, you have like REST APIs you can just like use, and then you communicate with some server logic on another server, which is great. But in Web 3, it's a bit different because there, especially when moving assets, it's all about like, okay, I can always like, interoperability is not a problem. Like interoperability is there. You can send messages from one chain to another. It exists today, right? You can move assets everywhere. It's actually not a problem. It's more like this, making it all secure and making it more efficient is kind of like what we are discussing. Right now, you just have different messaging protocols with different security assumptions and probably all with like third-party validator controlled by validator sets and multisigs, which is of course not great. And then you have assets being issued on a ton of different chains. And then bridged to, let's say, all the same like assets on Base or Arbitrum or Ethereum, then all wanted to be bridged to, let's say, Kraken's new Ink chain, right? And then you sometimes have the same asset from different chains with different security assumptions on your chain, and you have fragmentation, and this is then potentially an issue, right? So, of course, this could all be solved by just having Ethereum, and everyone's like, hey, we have enshrined ZK rollups on Ethereum with like real-time proving, and everyone uses the same smart contract to settle the proofs. Hey, we would all be happy, but this is just not the reality of things. We have different ecosystems and different platforms where assets get issued on, and we have to figure out how we can all make this seamless. How we can seamlessly move assets from one chain to another without causing fragmentation and lock-in. And so I think this is the problem we are trying to address also at Gelato. How can we enable projects to spin up the chain and have secure access to assets within minutes that don't have like 7-day withdrawal delays and stuff like this? And yeah, that's all like the areas we're working on.
Cool. You smoothly led me to the question about the challenges that we are facing in Interop. So your main concern is, as far as I understand, is security. And guys, do you have any other ideas, maybe some challenges that your company is facing themselves?
Can I start? This is my second company, Pi Squared. Previously, I found another company called Runtime Verification, which was a security auditing company. It is a security auditing company, and it's specialized on formal verification. Formal verification is also mentioned in the previous panel. So that's the highest level of assurance that we know. And the idea is to start with a mathematical model of the language, and then using that to use a formal reasoning system to prove properties about the code that you care about, in particular security properties. And one thing we learned that was a bit unexpected, I mean, it was expected, but not at that scale. How many bugs compilers have? Solidity compiler in particular. We found more than 15 bugs in the Solidity compiler. So you think that what you see is what you get. You look at the program, you compile it, run it, and in the end, it's something else that you execute. So how can we deal with that, right? So we cannot formally verify absolutely everything because that's very expensive, very, very hard to prove. And sometimes actually, honestly, people don't know exactly the security properties they want to prove. They say, well, I want the system to be secure. Yeah, but what does that mean specifically, right? When you sit down and actually write the exact security property, it's not that obvious anymore, but it is. But one thing that I believe we have the technology to not take risks with is programming language or bytecode language specific errors. And actually what we try to do now in Pi Square is to eliminate completely the programming language implementation or the potential bugs that you can have in implementation of the programming language from the picture. Okay, so because that is a source of problems. I mean, there are many aspects, many dimensions of security, but one dimension, the programming language itself and the implementation of the programming language to have bugs that can be exploited, Now that is completely eliminated. Now we know how to do that part, which means that we are left with the hard security properties to verify.
Yeah, so Eclipse is an L2. Obviously, we need to interoperate with other chains, at least from an asset transfer perspective, right? We want to interoperate with both Ethereum mainnet, other Ethereum L2s, and for example, other SVM chains such as Solana itself. Ultimately, that means we do need multiple methods of interoperability, or at the very least, asset transfers, right? I think crypto originally started with this ethos of permissionless building blocks, especially in the DeFi space. And I think we hoped that that same sort of values would apply to the interoperability space, but I don't think we've fully seen that play out. A lot of these sort of bridging solutions that claim, for example, that they are fully permissionless aren't exactly fully permissionless, or it's basically impossible for someone to spin up their own bridging route. Oftentimes, there's a certain degree of vendor lock-in. Oftentimes, there's quite a hefty upfront integration costs for these so-called quote-unquote permissionless bridges. So I think that's one thing that I'm slightly concerned about. Another thing is obviously like asset trust assumptions. If you look at just any chain from day one, right? Even for the largest chains, Arbitrum, they started off with wrapped USDC, and eventually they were issued native USDC. And now USDC on Arbitrum, even with incentives in Uniswap, has been a relatively shit show, right? They've only managed to, I think, probably change 50% of the wrapped USDC to native USDC. And so there's still two versions of USDC that are just floating around on Arbitrum with completely different trust assumptions. So I think that's another problem that chains will continue to have to grapple with. But yeah, I think trust assumptions, vendor lock-in, asset sort of fragmentation are some of the problems that I think still exist in interoperability today as it pertains to a chain.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I guess there's many security assumptions that you need to make when thinking about bridges. We have, like, obviously with Bitcoin, there's quite a few to choose from, of which we try to have as many as possible. And you run into the same issue, like the trilemma side of stuff. Like, you want to scale out your L2 or whatever, and usually the one that has the highest amount of liquidity, or the one that large amounts of holders are comfortable with, tends to be something that's custodial. So like WBTC is an example of that, like FBTC and all these other ones. Like TBTC is more decentralized, you could say, or it's at least spread across more nodes. But it's the issue with getting people to kind of move to that way of doing things. Like, it's all good saying that something is decentralized, but it's like, what do you actually mean when you say decentralized? Like, there's many different definitions of that, and it's quite an ambiguous term. Like, it's at the end of the day, it's all risk. There's different types of risks you want to take. Decentralization is one of those, and it seems that to actually kind of get to an area where people are comfortable with a bridge, right now it's quite centralized, and that's the thing that will get things to scale up eventually, and then we can move into more decentralized risk managed bridges and things like this. But I mean, that's one of the issues that I see right now, especially when trying to get big amounts of capital to move.
Chris, I have another question to you. How can combining of the security and the user base of Bitcoin and innovation of Ethereum enhance the blockchain ecosystem? And what are the outcomes of such a hybrid approach?
Yeah, so I think having a focus on how to actually solve the issues in terms of UX on Bitcoin, which up until this point has been bad. Like, it's very hard to use, and actually doing stuff on top of Bitcoin is bad because there's no smart contracts and all this kind of issues. We approach it from the other way. We say, why not just don't reinvent the wheel, use Bitcoin for what it's good for, which is it has lots of liquidity, it's very secure, and it's the most decentralized network. Keep all of that stuff, and then bring the usability and users from Ethereum onto that, basically. So we start as an OP stack roll-up. We have all of the good infrastructure. We can do all of this, like, we can integrate Gelato and like all of these things really, really easily. And then we figure out the complicated Bitcoin stuff in the background with the BitVM bridge, which basically just allows you to, instead of settling on Ethereum, you settle on Bitcoin. And it's as simple as that. And then you use all of the things that Ethereum's been winning at for the past 6-7 years, but then just settle on Bitcoin and use that for security. So there's that side of it, like bringing the security and not reinventing the wheel. And then obviously there's people that are more willing to speak to someone who's focused on Bitcoin rather than an ETH L2 when they're talking about large amounts of Bitcoin. So I speak to like lots of custodians, miners, all of these people. Because of the branding side of it and the focus that we have, we're able to solve those issues in a more in-depth way because we're having all those conversations all the time. Do we have all the solutions to it? Absolutely not. But having a focus on having those conversations specifically with people who have Bitcoin is a step in the right direction, I would say.
Cool. Ren, I'd like to move forward to you because your guys' business model is slightly similar because you combine like the best of two worlds of Ethereum and Solana. So, but my question will be different. The need for so much interoperability was in Ethereum has largely been a result of ETH being not really scalable, where we need more infra on top of the existing infra to make it more scalable. So the question is it gonna stay this way or is it gonna change?
I think if we look at the historical landscape of L2s over the past year, right? As Ethereum focused on its L2 roadmap, you had L2s such as like the OG ones, Arbitrum and Optimism launch. Eventually, they realized that they could probably accrue more value to the token through sort of roll-up stacks such as the OP stack and the Optimism Superchain or Arbitrum Orbit and Arbitrum, I don't know what they call it actually. And similarly, because of the constraints of the EVM, the fact that it's a single-threaded execution environment, a lot of these apps have had to grapple with the fact that either a piece of hot state basically degrades the user experience for their application, or B, the fact that basically no execution value is returned to them, right? You're basically paying, in some sense, 100% tax to the chain itself, even though you're generating all of this activity, all of this demand for block space for the chain itself. From there on, you see all of these apps go and spin up their own app chain, and now you have like tens of different app chains on Ethereum itself. You also have L3s that are sort of being created on top of L2s. And as a result of that, you basically have all of this like interoperability needs. And obviously people are trying to solve that. For example, shared sequencers, ag layers, chain abstraction, and special mainnet just went live, I think, 2 days ago. And that's a great first step. But ultimately, I think there is a certain incentive alignment problem for interoperability. It is in kind of everyone's self-interest to go with their own interoperability standard. If you look at the Optimism Superchain or Arbitrum, they have every incentive to launch their own shared sequencer network rather than opt into some other sort of existing shared sequencer network just because they are the source and origin and even the settlement layer of all of the economic value being created, right? So that is what the problem is today. Will it get solved? Yes. Will it get solved soon enough? No. I think there are certain stopgap solutions, at least for like sort of like asset bridging, right? You've seen solver-based bridges really take off in the past year, but for like true like interoperability, however you want to define that, right? Synchronous composability, asynchronous composability, like blah 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 blah. I think to reach a state that everyone is truly sort of like satisfied with, that might take too long, to be honest. And sometimes I also think interoperability might be a little overrated in crypto, actually. There are certain network effects that occur in crypto, especially as you watch ecosystems develop. I don't think a user is going to be like flip-flopping between like different chains in the future. Chances are every chain will look like its own app store. There's going to be some form of like duopoly or like 3 sort of dominant chains, and users will just stay on that chain.
You mentioned a really interesting point I'd like to elaborate on. So, what economic models or incentives can encourage blockchain networks to adopt interop solutions and collaborate rather than compete between each other?
I think if interoperating with another chain will allow you to generate an even larger amount of economic value, then you can and capture a larger amount of economic value, then you can capture yourself. That is a good financial sort of incentive and alignment for you to tap into like some existing interoperability solution. Whether that is true today remains to be seen. I think chances are some shared sequencer networks have done the math behind the scenes. They have sort of done like cross L2 like arbitrage and seeing whether, for example, if we did turn on a shared sequencer network, if all of these L2s did opt into our shared sequencer network, would they basically be able to capture more economic value? I think for me is like I'll see it when I believe it. I still feel like, especially for the Optimism superchain, right? They're doing a killer job, building all of these sort of OP stack chains with killer brand names. They're gonna have a huge amount of economic value. Chances are they're gonna go like, hey, we want to build our own interop solution. We want to build our own shared sequencer network, and then you come opt into ours. I don't want to go opt into yours because like I'm the king here, you know. I'm not gonna be like a peasant and opt into yours. You better come to me and beg to be sort of integrated with mine.
Maybe innovative applications will push the envelope and will create demand for interoperability. For example, if you want to have access to liquidity on different chains, but without moving them, right? Imagine an Aave like protocol where you can deposit collateral on one chain and borrow on another chain. And you don't, of course, you can always move the liquidity, but you don't want to, right? So we'll see hopefully more and more applications of this kind, and users want to use them, and they will put pressure on the infrastructure, right, to provide the whatever it is, messaging system, maybe the wormhole-like solution, whatever it is. But in the end, I think applications will and users ultimately will
Cool.
push.
All right. Does anyone else have something to add on that cause? All right. Then we don't have too much time, and I will ask the last question. How do you guys envision the future of Web3 interop?
Millions of rollups, a lot of ZK.
Are you sure we don't have time? I thought we have until
4 more minutes.
4 more minutes. Okay. The future.
Is uncertain.
You know how they say it's hard to predict, especially the future. But I believe that as a formal verification and formal semanticist, I believe that everything that we want to reason about or to claim correctness about must have a formal semantics, which is a rigorous mathematical definition. I know that's not the most popular view of the world, but it's the only, literally the only way that we know as a species, right, that something is absolutely correct, right, when you can do a mathematical proof. And you cannot do a mathematical proof unless you have a mathematical model of the language. What is less understood is that once you have a mathematical model, you have everything. You don't only need to implement ad hoc solutions to execute programs. You can generate the executions together with everything, all the proofs that you can also eventually transform into ZK proofs. So I'm on the same page with ZK that are all correct by construction. So at least these kind of bugs related to implementations, I forgot this little bit, I forgot this little, call. So this should not exist. These minor bugs should not even exist. And I think that will make us feel more comfortable to use interoperable applications. So I think there is a lot that we can do in terms of correctness, which will help.
I have no clue, to be honest. I think interop solutions continue being built. Chains continue to launch their own interop solutions. One area that I will be very interested in seeing is whether roll-up as a service providers launch their own interop solution. I think eventually, hopefully sooner rather than later, network effects sort of accrue to certain interop solutions, and the other 99% of the interop solutions die out, so that we can adopt some sort of common standard. Whether that comes from like a third party company, or whether that comes from someone, say like the Ethereum Foundation adopting a certain like token standard, remains to be seen. But yeah, I think it'll remain as competitive as ever, especially in the sort of cross-chain messaging and asset like transfer, like interop space.
Yeah, I guess I think you'll see a lot more specialization, like specific chains having specific use cases for specific things, more of that, rather than kind of like a sea of L2s. I think the big things like Superchain and the competitors, all of that, there will eventually be a winner of that who will have the economies of scale that will actually like make that the place to go eventually. And yeah, same with the kind of bridging side of stuff. I see eventually there has to be one winner. It's kind of a few, it's between quite a lot at the moment, but there will have to be, for things to actually work, there'll have to be one that gets used by most people, and stops this whole fragmentation side of things. And I think eventually there will be one, in the same way that you sort of like Web 2 and things like that, that you go to one place for one thing. And so I guess standardization in places like that, and then that will allow for actually kind of unique L2s to be doing specific stuff, like I don't know, Bitcoin for more secure stuff that's to do with institutions, and then more interesting stuff going on in Ethereum, and everyone kind of having their own like carved area eventually, rather than kind of everyone like figuring this out right now. That's what I see.
Thank you so much for your insights, and thank you guys for joining us. Thank you.